his review of it, and when I first read it, I adamantly disagreed with him because he didn't really like Thor Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm.
And now, after watching it again, I still think he's wrong about how much he disliked it. His opinions are objectively wrong, but they're not as wrong as they were the first time.
Congratulations, Aaron Welty. You've been upgraded from totally wrong to not as wrong. This will be fun. Maybe we should make sure you guys we'll have a throwdown on the podcast here at some point.
I was going to say that if he wants to rip apart my opinions of this movie on the air or on this show, maybe you could have a short segment of another episode, or even a mini episode where it's Aaron tears apart Jeff's opinions on Ragnarok.
We can post Aaron's review in the show notes and let the listeners decide for themselves.
But here's why I think the changes to Ragnarok were good. And it's basically just because they made changes. And I know that might sound silly, but I came to this conclusion. So it's interesting how I came across Ragnarok, the copy that I watched, because I was going to get it through Netflix DVD, and I ended up getting very angry at Netflix DVD this week because they were misleading in the way that they advertise when their DVDs are available.
For shame, Netflix DVD.
Yeah. So there was no caveat. That was the problem. It was on my list, and it was it's going to be available on this date. Mm-hmm. And then so I assumed that when that date came, if I returned a movie, they would, and it's at the top of my list, the next one that I assumed they'd get a ton of copies to, cover demand, right?
Right.
Well, they probably do get a ton of copies to cover demand, but not enough. And they don't explain that, hey, and I'd never really tried to get a new release through there before, so they don't explain, hey, it's released on this date, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to send it to you. Right. So after 2 DVDs came, and I'm trying to watch those quickly and send them back so I can get to Ragnarok so we can record on the date that we had planned. Mm-hmm. I finally came to the conclusion I'm not getting Ragnarok from Netflix. So a friend of a friend had it, and he had the collector's edition, and it comes with this neat little gallery book that has some words, foreword by the director and afterword by Chris Hemsworth. And what's interesting is Waititi says that Marvel approached me and they said they wanted to really change up the franchise. Mm-hmm. So here's the first thing. And knowing this stuff made me understand things better and actually be maybe a little less critical of it. Because when the franchise owner comes up to the director and says, we want to change this, and that explains why he makes changes, right?
Yeah.
So... and they said, we want to take Thor in a new direction. And so Waititi says his approach to the film was very much from a position of having to push aside all that old stuff and treat Ragnarok as its own entity, which I think he did really well. It feels different.
It totally does.
I don't think that's a bad thing. And the reason why I don't think that's a bad thing is because the only way a franchise stays alive is if it's constantly reevaluating, evolving, and changing.
Yes.
This is why things like The Fast and the Furious get mocked so much, because it's the same movie over and over again, right?
Right, where are they going to go next? Space? And actually, it probably will, yes.
Yes, and there will be submarines. I think the latest, I love seeing the trailers for those movies because I just laugh at the new and ridiculous things. I actually have a friend who loves the movies, and he actually has pretty good taste, but he loves them because, and I didn't know this, I gained a new appreciation for them. They don't actually take themselves as seriously as they look like they are.
Right.
They're just having fun, which is good. And so he says, I'm looking at the thing right now, he thought he wanted to expand as a creative and a storyteller, and he wanted it to be a fun ride that has high stakes and emotional truth. And I'm he did it. He did exactly what he wanted to do. He made a really fun ride that had really high stakes and some deep emotional truths in it.
Yeah, and lest I think that maybe I overstated a little bit when I said at the beginning that it's just a confection, because it's definitely a lot lighter than the other Thor films. But there are some very effective emotional and dramatic moments, and one of my favorites is when Thor and Loki are with Odin right before he dies. And the affection with which Odin speaks to both of them together.
Yes.
Like, he doesn't ever address one or the other of his sons. He addresses them together each time. He says, my sons.
Yeah.
And actually,
overlooking like all of the faults and flaws that both of them had previous.
And actually, as I think about it, what I said before wasn't true, that he doesn't address any one of them in particular, because I think, I could be wrong, but I think he doesn't really, he does. He does speak to each of them. Loki, I think, if I remember correctly, I think Loki does not actually say anything to him. But he speaks to Loki.
And you can tell that Loki is very emotionally moved by this.
Yeah. Like, I think he goes through sort of a range of emotions that obviously, again, we're going to just extol the amazingness of Tom Hiddleston in this sequence especially, that he is able to convey such a range of emotion without speaking a word. Like, he's very abashed and uncomfortable to be in the presence of the father.
Right, because he just banished him, right?
Right.
It's one of those great situations where a wrong has been done to somebody, and when they finally meet again, the guy who was wronged isn't angry.
Yeah.
And it just immediately extends forgiveness, and it makes the other person really uncomfortable.
Right. So he's at first really like uncomfortable, and then as Odin continues to speak and speaks no judgment over him, you can tell that he's really moved by all of this. And what really got me was when Odin says to him, in regards to the spell that he put him under to basically enfeeble him and make him, look like a likely candidate for a retirement home. All that he says, his only commentary on that entire episode, is that it took me a while to break out of your enchantment. Frigga would have been so proud. Like this, like, you did good work on that. Like, you did a good job. What you did was wrong, but he doesn't even say that. That's implicit.
Right.
Like, your craftsmanship was excellent.
Yeah.
And then he ends just by saying, I love you, my sons.
Yeah. So this reminds me of an interesting conversation I had with one of my college friends who will go unnamed, but we had an argument, and I was arguing that that God is pleased with even people who are not his children doing really good work. Like, so I had this, my example was, I had been listening to a lot of Ben Folds at the time, and I'm like, well, he's obviously not a Christian, but I said, I think God is glorified when Ben Folds writes amazing songs and plays the piano really well, because he's God's creation too.
Yeah.
And he's using the innate gifts and abilities that God gave him to make amazing stuff. That has to make God proud. My one friend was arguing, no, God is only glorified by songs that are specifically for praising God. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. We didn't really resolve the argument. But like, I think it's that it reminds me of that kind of idea where it's like, even though something that has been done has been for ill intent, you can admire like how well it was executed. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
And I guess it's not a perfect analogy, because I really don't think Ben Folds had ill intent when he wrote his songs, but you know what I'm saying.
Probably not. Yeah, I do. But the grace and the love that is the hallmark of that conversation, I think, is really just very, very touching and very well executed. And And also, if we're gonna talk about the amazingness of an actor, when you look at Anthony Hopkins, who goes from playing Loki, playing Odin,
yes,
to being the genuine article, and to be able to
Loki
sell both of those,
yes,
really effectively is just
good.
Once again the hallmark of an amazing actor.
Yeah, he plays a really good serial killer too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say Loki as Odin is hilarious.
Yes,
Anthony Hopkins playing Loki as Odin is hilarious.
Yeah, that's a great sequence. And I didn't know the first time I saw the movie, because I just didn't recognize him. I didn't know that Matt Damon was playing Loki on the stage. And that's hilarious.
You know what's funny is I didn't know that either, even though you had told me and I had forgotten. And then when I was watching it, I was like, somebody is playing somebody on that stage that I should know, but I can't remember who John said it was.
Yeah. So, I think the other people. I didn't remember it when I was watching it, but I'm pretty sure that Chris Hemsworth's other brother is playing Thor.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was like, I think that might be Chris's brother, and that's what John was talking about. But yeah, I think that's what it was Liam Hemsworth.
No, it's not. I don't think it is Liam.
Not Liam, it's the other brother.
It's another brother who's not well known for acting.
Okay, that's really funny too, if that's the case. Yeah, so from what he said in this thing, Chris Hemsworth really liked being on Thor Ragnarok. Well, I'm sure he did, but he said I remember laughing a lot the first time I read the script.
Yeah.
Thor felt different. He's developed a real sense of humor, especially after spending a lot of his time on Earth. He's not straight off the ship Asgardian anymore. We were able to give him a more contemporary feel, and that gave me a new challenge to tackle. And I actually like that. This is one of the changes that I like, is where you can see the character changing over time. Mm-hmm. And Thor has spent so much time not on Asgard now that he's not the straight off Asgard guy that he was in the original Thor movie.
Sure.
And that's what I noticed. I noticed he's saying very contemporary Earth phrases now.
Yeah.
And that might have bothered some people, but it didn't bother me. I think it actually makes his character more believable.
Yeah.
Because when you go places and travel, you pick up little, idiosyncrasies or ways of speaking that,
totally.
Well, you would definitely know this, being traveling, being Estonian and American, but even when I'd go visit some of my extended family in Tennessee, I'd have a bit of a southern drawl, when I came back. But yeah, and what I wanted to say too was the fact that Marvel it's really encouraging for me to see that Marvel realizes that a franchise needs to continue changing and evolving in order to stay alive, because that's what kills so many franchises. So yes, maybe some people didn't, enjoy Ragnarok as much as the first two, and by some people I mean Aaron Welty.
Apparently he's the only one. Sorry, Aaron.
But it's not necessarily a bad thing that it changed. Maybe you didn't like the changes, but this is why, to make another analogy, the only other two things I know about in the world, this is why The Legend of Zelda, I think, has been such a great long-lived franchise, is because if you play those games, especially on the 3D consoles, none of them feel like any of the other games, really. Uh-huh. They all have a completely different feel to them. Being in the same franchise, some with the same kind of formula, to the game, and yet they have a totally different feel. And because of that, the franchise has been very successful. I think that's one of the reasons they have. And also because of that, there are games that people hate, and just as many people love them. So, you know what I mean? So it's I think it's a good thing that Ragnarok was different, and that some people dislike it and some people love it. Well, I'm one of the people that loves it. Yes, maybe there is a little bit too much forced humor, but I'm happy that it was there, because it was such a hilarious ride the first time.
Yeah.
And And I also think that, like, giving Thor as a character that kind of humor, I love that that's the direction they're going.
See, I think that is really interesting.